It was 15 years ago from now, back when I was in elementary school. April came around, and we had a class shuffle. Our new class teacher was a young woman. When lunchtime came, the teacher turned to a girl who sat next to me and told her not to eat the school lunch. Katie, you haven't paid your lunch fee, so don't eat, okay? Katie, who always wore ragged clothes, was a skinny little girl. Apparently, her family was poor, and since last fall, her parents hadn't been paying the school lunch fee. I learned about this later on from overhearing some gossip, but it seemed she was allowed to eat lunch the previous year. Seeing her being the only one without any food on her desk and just looking down made me feel sorry for her. But since the teacher ate lunch in the same room, I couldn't secretly share my food with her. So I left just the bread, wrapped it in a napkin, hid it in my desk, and gave it to Katie after lunch was over and the teacher left the room. You can eat this. Really? Thank you, Jason. Back then, I was an outcast among my classmates and had no friends in the same class, but after that incident, I started talking to Katie. When I got home that day, I told my mom about Katie's family situation. Mom, please, can you make a packed lunch for Katie? When I pleaded like that, my mom responded, that poor child. If she can't eat lunch, it won't be good for her growth, and she probably can't concentrate on her studies when she's hungry. It's fine. I'm already making your dad's lunch every day, so adding one more portion won't make much difference. With that, she gladly agreed. The next day at lunch break, when I handed over the homemade lunch my mom made, Katie's eyes widened in surprise. My mom said to give this to you. Is this a packed lunch? Yeah, I told her about you, and she said to give it to you. Really? Thank you, Jason. She hurriedly ate the lunch before the teacher returned to the classroom. It turned out that Katie's house was in the same direction as mine, so from that day on, we decided to walk home together. While walking, Katie told me about her life. My dad doesn't work, yet he spends all our money on slot machines and horse races. My mom earns the money, but my dad takes it all. Because of this, they were struggling and even in debt. Seeing her wearing the same tattered clothes every day, I felt sorry for her. Our classmates just watched her from a distance. Neither of us had friends. After that, we started meeting up in the morning and going to school together. Some of our classmates teased us, saying, "Are you two dating or something?" But we tried not to let it bother us. I've always been bad at talking to people, but for some reason, I felt at ease talking to Katie. I didn't realize it, but it seemed I was lonelier than I thought. Not having any friends, I was really happy to be able to talk to her. On our way to and from school, we talked about a lot of things. Our families, our favorite foods and animals, homework, and TV shows we watched the previous night. I found out she loves cats. She can't have one at her house, but she enjoys visiting a nearby park where stray cats often gather. My family has a cat. Want to come over and see it? Really? Sure. When I brought her to my house after school that day, my mom warmly welcomed her. When our mixed-breed cat showed up, Katie's eyes sparkled with delight. How cute. What's its name? It's Mary. Mary, come here. Katie looked so happy cuddling the cat, playing with toys, and feeding it treats. Seeing her radiant smile, which she didn't show at school, somehow made me feel happy too. In a blink of an eye, it was evening, and my mom prepared dinner even for Katie. Katie, can you give me your home phone number? I'll call your folks and let them know you're here. With that, my mom called her house. During the call, she seemed deeply engrossed in the conversation. After that day, Katie began having dinner at our house every night. Apparently, her mom often worked late, and her dad, who was at home, didn't do any housework. As a result, their dinner time was always late, so with her parents' permission, our mom started looking after her meals. After school, Katie and I would do our homework and play with the cat until dinner. However, about a year into this routine, Katie had to move. Her parents divorced, and she decided to move with her mom to her maternal grandparents' place in Texas. Before moving, she and her mom came over to say goodbye. I can't thank you enough for all that you've done for Katie. We'll never forget your kindness, her mother said, bowing to my mom. Oh, please, it's okay. Please raise your head. We help each other out during tough times. Don't give it another thought, my mom replied. My mom was a person of strong principles and kindness. I have tremendous respect for her. I can't recall the conversation I had with Katie that day. I haven't seen her since. We exchanged Christmas cards every year, but that also ceased after 5 to 6 years. Then I graduated college and started working at a precision machinery manufacturer. I was assigned to sales, and it's been 3 years now. Taking over clients from seniors and establishing new ones, I now handle numerous major accounts. Good morning, Jason. My colleague Mike from the next desk greeted me. Good morning. Tomorrow, we've got a meeting with AB Electronics. It's a big deal that's vital for the company. You pumped and prepared? Yes, I'll have it ready for review later. As we talked, a secretary called out to Mike. Mike, there's a call for you from May Electronics. Picking up the phone, Mike's face turned pale rapidly. What? How could this? Yes, I see. I'm terribly sorry. Right away. Please, can you give us one more chance? What? Wait, hold on. After hanging up, he just stared blankly, still holding the phone. What happened? I asked. Turning to me, he said, Jason, you gave the wrong time to AB Electronics for our meeting, didn't you? They thought the meeting was yesterday. They're furious that we stood them up. This deal is toast. It's your fault. What? But wasn't it you who communicated the schedule to them? What, are you trying to pin this on me? I wanted to throw his words right back at him. To begin with, I hadn't communicated the schedule to the client at all. Mike had arranged the schedule and then informed me about it later. And yet, trying to blame it on me, he reported the matter to his boss and supervisor. Johnson went to apologize on his behalf. However, they wouldn't listen, and in the end, the deal with AB Electronics fell through. When Johnson returned, he said to me, Jason, what have you done? Because of you, the crucial deal we staked our company's future on has been ruined. How are you going to make this right? But sir, it wasn't me who informed them about the schedule. It was Mike. Enough. No excuses. You've caused harm to the company. Maybe you should consider resigning. That's something Johnson always says when he's angry. Wait, I really don't want to quit. Then bring in a contract worth the same amount as the machine we were going to sell to AB Electronics within 3 days, or you're fired. How could I possibly secure such a deal in just 3 days? I was at a loss for words after hearing Johnson's ultimatum. But then I remembered something. There's a client who's currently considering purchasing the same machine we were planning to sell to AB Electronics. They always try to haggle the price down, constantly negotiating for discounts. I'd almost given up, thinking they had no intention of buying, but now I had to somehow close the deal with them. I quickly revised the quotation and set an appointment with that client. Upon arriving at their company, a man named Kevin assisted me. I've brought a new quotation today, I said, handing him the quote. Kevin scrutinized it. Can't you go a little lower? I really can't go any lower. We've adjusted the price several times already, I pleaded with Kevin, putting on a distressed look. Please, Kevin, I'm sure our equipment will be very beneficial to your company. We'll even include regular maintenance. Kevin pondered, crossing his arms. I get what you're saying, but at this price, my superiors might not approve. I personally want to purchase it, but how about I explain the benefits directly to your boss? Maybe over a meal or something. That might be difficult. My boss is pretty busy. I'm begging you, Kevin. Please just give me a chance to discuss it over dinner. I pleaded desperately. The machine sells for tens of thousands of dollars. For our company, the cost of a dinner would be insignificant compared to the sale. All right, Oz, but my boss is out right now, so I'll get back to you another day. That's fine. Thank you so much. Kevin saw me out of the conference room. Just then, the elevator opened, and an older man entered the office. Supervisor, I wanted to see you. Do you have a moment? Seeing him, Kevin immediately approached. So, this is Kevin's superior. Kevin explained the situation to the supervisor, but to my surprise, the supervisor began to shout angrily. Trying to win us over with a dinner. We told you countless times, if we can't afford it, we can't buy it. If you can't offer a better price, then just leave and don't come back. Did I do something so wrong to be yelled at like this? While I was still in shock, Kevin whispered to me as he nudged me towards the exit. I'm sorry, he is just in a bad mood today. He always lashes out like this when he's upset. It seems the supervisor is quite a difficult character, but without his approval, we won't be able to finalize the deal. If I don't land this contract, I'm going to lose my job. What should I do? As I was racking my brain, I heard the sound of heels clicking down the hallway. Wait, supervisor. I turned around to the sound of a young woman's voice. There stood a beautiful woman in a business suit. Watson, what's up? She quickly approached the puzzled-looking supervisor. I've reviewed the documents too, and I believe that equipment from that company would be valuable for us. Please consider purchasing it. She looked straight into the supervisor's eyes as she spoke. Well, if you say so, Watson. Kevin, move forward with the contract process right away. The supervisor then turned to me and said. I was absolutely gobsmacked for a moment. I had no idea what had just happened. So you're saying you'll make the purchase? Yes, Jason can't say no when the boss's daughter asks. Now can we? Boss's daughter? This woman. As I looked at her, she smiled and said, Jason, long time no see. Don't you remember me? Even though she said that, I don't recall knowing any Watson. But as I continued to gaze into her face, it felt somewhat familiar. Wait, who are you again? She spoke up again. Do you remember me as Katie? Katie? Oh, is she talking about the same Katie I used to walk to and from school with and hang out at my place during grade school? She's changed so much. I didn't recognize her. Wow, it's been like 15 years, hasn't it? Yeah, so nostalgic. I saw your name on the business card attached to the documents and thought it might be you. Really? Boss's daughter? Actually, my mom remarried when I was in high school, and I took on the name Watson. Wow, really? Hey Jason, instead of just standing here chatting, want to go out for a drink tonight? Sure, sounds good. Katie and I exchanged contact info and planned to meet for drinks after work. When I got back to the office and reported the good news, my supervisor was taken aback. You really got the contract? Yes, we haven't signed the papers yet, but we got the green light. Great job, Jason. Supervisor was thrilled. Looking over at my colleague, Mike, he seemed uneasy at his desk. After wrapping up work for the day and heading to the bar for our meetup, I found Katie already waiting. Thanks for today. You saved me. I didn't get fired because of you. What are you talking about? As I filled her in, she was sympathetic. It's terrible for a senior to put the blame on a junior like that. Well, thanks to you, the deal went through, so I'm really grateful. Seriously, thanks. Upon hearing my gratitude, Katie shyly smiled. I'm honored I could help. To be honest, I've always been grateful to you for everything. We lost touch after I moved, but I'm glad we could reconnect like this. According to Katie's story, when she was in high school, her mother divorced and began dating a man who was then the manager of the office where she worked. They eventually got married. However, a few years later, Katie's stepfather's father, the CEO of the New York headquarters, fell ill and he had to take over his position. Their whole family moved to the city. You could have let me know when you moved back. Sorry, but weren't you the one who stopped replying to my New Year's cards first, Jason? Did I? Yes, so I thought maybe you found a girlfriend, and I didn't want to intrude. Turns out I never did get a girlfriend. Really? No girlfriend? Nope, none. Well, maybe our meeting here is fate. If you're okay with it, would you like to date me? I was taken aback by her sudden confession and was rendered speechless for a moment. But it wasn't that I disliked the idea. I was actually really happy. Back in elementary school, being around her always made me happy, and whenever she laughed, I felt joy. I remembered that feeling. Of course, I'd love to. I extended my right hand to her, and she gently took it. Really? I'm so happy. This is how we started dating. 2 years later, I proposed, and we got married. Mary, dinner's ready. Seeing her play with our cat, she seemed just like the old times. Katie had faced many challenges growing up, but from now on, I wanted to be by her side and make her happy. Alex is my name. I work in an office, and I'm 28 years old. Before I started working for this company, a lot happened. I was placed in daycare at a young age since my parents owned a small business. Despite being the only child at the time, my parents, grandfather, and I shared a leased apartment. My granddad and I had a tight relationship. I would accompany my grandfather when he went shopping in the evenings because my mom would frequently arrive home late. He was a good man who always got me snacks, cooked rice, laid out the side dishes he bought, and occasionally made curries. I wasn't particularly powerful physically. My mom would leave work to drive me to the doctor whenever I had the flu or something because my granddad was still a full-time employee. However, I can vividly picture her expression of frustration as she said, "You're really a handful." My nights were extremely depressing since my parents' business wasn't going well, and they were constantly fighting over money. When I started elementary school, I had my own room because the apartment was a little roomy, but I couldn't sleep properly because I could often hear them fighting. My grandfather never participated in their disagreements and went to bed early. I frequently stayed at home due to leg discomfort or headaches, even in primary school. "Take it easy," my grandfather would remark as he left in the morning, still working. "Are you not feeling well again?" My mom said, worried, before leaving to work with my dad. She once took me to the doctor after calling the school, but they were unable to diagnose the issue. I occasionally passed out during morning assembly and woke up in the nurse's office, even when I was enrolled in school. I would feel better and go back to class after taking a short break. However, because I was absent a lot, I found it difficult to form friends and was typically left alone. I didn't enjoy school at all, and after courses, I would go straight home and play video games until my grandfather got back. My studies suffered as a result of my irregular attendance at school. Kevin was a boy in the same grade as me who lived close by. I was typically by myself, so I once persuaded Kevin to play video games with me while he brought me the handouts from the days I missed. He smiled as he approached. We had fun playing games together because Kevin's parents worked late too. "Oh, I need to do my homework or my mom will get mad at me," Kevin stated abruptly. As a result, we worked on our assignments together. I didn't understand anything and was already falling behind in my academics. Kevin assisted me with my assignment in a patient manner. But before long, I was unable to attend school on another morning. My mom apparently dropped by a bookstore on her way back from a meeting with my teacher and placed a few reference books on my desk without saying anything. With an inward sigh, I thought, so I have to study. I didn't enjoy studying at all. My mother thought I was just making up a sickness to get out of going to school because she didn't know what was causing it. However, I actually experienced headaches and occasionally stomach pains. Kevin visited again one day. He said, "Hey Alex, are you sick?" "Yeah, I really feel bad in the morning, but the doctor can't figure out why," I responded. Kevin smiled mischievously. "Look, I snuck this into my backpack today," he remarked, grinning as he produced a gaming guide. I became quite excited. I loved playing video games, but I detested learning. Before my birthday, I would go shopping with my grandfather and persuade him to purchase me a game, even though my parents never bought me any software. To avoid my mother discovering it and becoming upset, I kept it tucked away in my desk drawer. Kevin responded, glancing at my study desk, "Oh, reference books. Let me check." Kevin seems to like learning. Taking one of the books, he began jotting down his responses in his notepad. In the meantime, I became absorbed in the game guide that Kevin had loaned me. I played the game by myself, attempting to solve it. By dusk, my grandfather was back at his house. He appeared to be preparing curries that day. It had a wonderful scent. I hadn't eaten lunch that day because I hadn't attended school. "Kevin, if you'd like, you can stay and have dinner with us," my grandfather said as he called us. My granddad offered some curry to Kevin. Kevin said it was exquisite, thanked my papa, and accepted with pleasure. Kevin and I became close friends as a result. "Hey Alex, could you check the answers in the reference book I worked on?" Kevin asked as he was heading out, and made their way home. I checked the reference book and Kevin's notebook, and he was spot on. By reviewing Kevin's responses, I was able to gain a better understanding of my studies over the course of several days. We were in the early elementary school years at the time, and we eventually advanced to the higher classes. I did, however, occasionally miss school. As usual, my mom would purchase fresh reference books in silence and thump them onto my desk. Kevin and I would complete our schoolwork together and then enjoy playing games at night as I gradually became more motivated to learn. My parents were still fighting over money as usual. I would play video games in an attempt to decompress, but their voices would keep me awake even after taking a bath and going to bed. I would therefore play games late into the night while lowering the volume. In retrospect, I saw that my unpredictable lifestyle probably had a part in my morning sickness. I continued on to junior high school in spite of everything. I was glad to be in the same class as Kevin throughout my first year, but as soon as middle school coursework started, I slipped behind. Kevin became busier and began attending cram schools. We kept walking home together after school because he wasn't too interested in sports clubs either. After taking a bath one evening during my sophomore year of high school, my grandfather passed out. My grandfather never regained consciousness and died, but my mom phoned an ambulance right soon, and I accompanied her to the hospital. On a chilly winter day, my grandfather, whom I loved, had a modest burial. I spent days crying in my room after I got home. I even spent some time weeping in bed and skipping school. After that, I started purchasing meals from convenience stores to eat by myself, and my mom would give me money for dinner. Throughout my middle school years, I continued to have erratic attendance. Kevin concentrated on his schoolwork, and I grew to like a bunch of naughty youngsters from the after-school club. My mother would often groan when I got home, and because there was nothing fun to do there. I began to stay out late, visiting the homes of my naughty friends and occasionally not coming home until after 9:00 p.m. I would occasionally even spend the night at their house, but I would notify my mother by text, to which she would never respond. Our group leader had a large residence where we were free to play games as much as we liked. I kept skipping school, and my parents, exhausted, stopped even reprimanding me. We got together at convenience stores to get meals and snacks. My friends all appeared to be dealing with family issues of their own. Everyone would congregate at the leader's house, who was incredibly wealthy and would even buy us drinks. The majority of them hardly even went to school. Kevin began to distance himself from me. Perhaps misfortune comes in waves. My parents died in a vehicle accident the year after my grandfather's death. My dad's sister, my aunt, took over because I was at a loss for what to do. I was left alone after losing my family. That day, like the day my grandfather passed away, I was struck with melancholy despite the fact that I wasn't very close to my parents. Another chilly winter day has arrived. My parents' business had to close, but I managed to live in the apartment until I just finished middle school. However, I eventually had to leave because it was a rental. My aunt claims that although I had a respectable amount of life insurance, the majority of the funds were used to pay off my dad's debts and close the business. I gave up on attending high school, of course. I had no desire to go at all. I started living alone in a tiny apartment without a bathroom after my aunt took on the role of guardian. I found a job at a neighboring convenience store because I had to start working right away to support myself. Early in the mornings was when I worked. Brian Smith, the store manager, treated me with kindness and patiently showed me how to do the job. I didn't have time to hang out with my wicked buddies, but I also lost track of them. My morning health started to improve about that time, and I established a pattern, but work kept me so busy that by the time I returned to my apartment, I was worn out. The cherry blossoms tragically dispersed as spring arrived. In order to alleviate my weariness, I began visiting the neighboring historic baths on a daily basis. But with everyday trips, the bathhouse costs started to mount up. I've been eating meals from the convenience shop every day, so I thought it was time to start cooking for myself, even if it was an inevitable expense. I started gradually setting aside money from my paychecks to purchase kitchenware and a rice cooker. I used to visit the grocery store after work to try my hand at cooking and find deals. Despite my inexperience, I frequently thought about how my grandfather would expertly cook. I purchased a portable stove to conserve gas. In addition to adjusting to work and getting by day, I eventually got used to cooking for myself by gathering culinary supplies from a dollar store. I purchased a used, antiquated washing machine, and because I had a balcony, I dried my clothing indoors. Cleaning and shelf stocking were among the hectic jobs at the convenience store. Brian took me out to eat one day. "Alex is studying something you detest?" he inquired. I answered, "Yeah, I wasn't really a fan." I told Brian about my family situation when I was recruited, so he was aware of it and didn't ask any more questions. However, he laughed and added, "I wasn't too fond of studying either." He went on to say that he will support my future efforts. For the first time, someone other than my mother, who solely urged me to study, gave me encouragement. I made the decision to put in a lot of effort and thanked him before going to the bathhouse. There was a huge mural of Mount Fuji on the wall of the old-fashioned bathhouse. I would frequently gaze at it, allowing it to calm my weary body from work, and then fall asleep peacefully. By conversing with the residents of the same apartment complex at the bathhouse, I began to get to know them. Many of them began frequenting the convenience store to shop after I gained their support for my efforts as a young person. Brian smiled and said, "Alex, it looks like you've made a lot of new friends lately." "They are, in fact, my neighbors," I answered. "They're all nice people who support me," and Brian gave me a kind smile. Then summer arrived. I purchased an air conditioner using my savings. The store had air conditioning, but at night it was too hot to sleep there. When my bathhouse sessions, I would cool off when the air conditioner was installed. Cold noodles became my nighttime staple, and I was also able to save electricity. I liked summer's heat better than winter's chill. The street trees were gorgeously green, and they gleamed from the rain. I often thought about how I had caused my parents so much concern before they unexpectedly passed away, without getting the chance to repay them, and winter always brought back memories of the day I bid goodbye to my grandfather. The summer seemed to go by fast. Kevin showed up to the convenience store one fall day wearing his school uniform. Upon seeing me at the register, he was taken aback. "It's been a long time, Alex. I see you're putting in a lot of effort and remaining on course," Kevin remarked. I answered, "Yeah, I have to work." Kevin grinned and was relieved at how much more at ease I appeared to be. I didn't see Kevin again after that, and winter came around again. The chilly wind pounded my run-down apartment's windows, allowing breezes to enter through the gaps. I purchased a tiny space heater since I didn't think I could make it through the winter. I would frequently find that my body, which had been warmed by the baths, would rapidly cool off because I am rather sensitive to the cold. I started preparing hot pot every day and purchasing Napa cabbage. I experimented with several varieties, occasionally using miso to warm up pork soup, occasionally making spicy hot pot, and occasionally using chicken. My chili body would get hotter if I added more chili powder. I had been employed at the convenience shop for roughly 4 years by that point. When I was 19, I discovered Brian at the workplace with a friend from high school named Matt. Brian said he needed to talk and called me in. "Actually, Alex, the store will relocate to the town's primary hospital. You would have a very difficult commute there. I therefore sought advice from my friend Matt, a classmate. An office clerk is needed by a local company," he said. "Would you be able to work there?" "What? Alex? Me working in the office?" "It largely consists of easy computing activities," Matt remarked. "I think you can handle it, but it can get pretty busy." I answered, "I'm not very good with computers." Matt reassured me, "Don't worry, it's just entering numbers." I chose to accept Matt's offer since I couldn't afford to lose my job. The commute was convenient because the company was located near a noodle factory. Matt's introduction helped me land the job, despite the fact that I had only completed middle school. After I introduced myself and purchased a suit, a senior coworker gave me a tour of the company. It was my responsibility to phone each of the company's 200 or so customers every day to collect their orders. I had to enter the figures into the computer. Knowing it was only numbers gave me a small sense of relief. Chris, a coworker of mine who was roughly my age, divided the workload with me. I eventually figured things out thanks to his patient instruction. They had hastily publicized the position because it appeared that the previous clerk had departed. Chris and I got along well, and we were about the same age. Although all the bosses were kind, my work was very significant. I had to make calls to supermarkets and noodle shops, check their inventory, and precisely enter the orders into the computer. Chris and I divided the calls as I grew more accustomed to the position, each managing 100 clients. I was a little anxious, but I completed the assignment. But when I got my first paycheck, I was taken aback. Despite being formally employed, I only received roughly $1,300 in take-home income. I had just completed middle school, though. I knew it would be difficult to find another job if I tried, and I had no other skills. I decided to persevere, conserving money where I could and continuing. My former convenience store manager's friend, Matt, who had referred me to this position, sent me an email on my phone one day. I had heard Matt say, "If you ever need anything, just reach out." I responded to his message by saying, "Thanks to you, it's going well." The fact that he was considering me truly moved me. Despite the poor compensation, it was a comfort to work there because of the rather familial atmosphere. Hey, sometimes Mr. Harris, the chairman's son and president, comes by to check the office, Chris told me in a low voice one day. Simply keep your head down and concentrate on your task when he does. I took notice of Chris's advice and thanked him. Actually, I had never laid eyes on the president's face. What sort of guy was he? I wondered. A month or so later, Mr. Harris appeared. Everyone fell silent instantly and proceeded to work hard. Mr. Harris, who had furrowed brows and a severe face, appeared to be in his 40s. Before he left without saying anything, he silently examined each person's computer screen. After that, everyone appeared relieved. Chris later informed me that if something annoyed Mr. Harris, he would get irascible and start ranting. That his visit had gone smoothly gave me a sense of relief. "Alex, one of our client noodle shops, is surprisingly good," Chris commented afterward, and we spent the evening there. Yes, the food was delicious. We divided the cost, of course, but the costs were fair. Time went by as we became closer, and we would occasionally go to other clients' noodle restaurants or get coffee together. I realized I had been mistaken to expect much of a bonus, and my pay went up a little, but it was still a minor raise. It was merely a small increase in my base salary. Before heading to bed, I liked to play mobile games since I had upgraded my phone. Chris and I had a great time playing internet games. It brought back memories of how much I enjoyed playing games as a child. The winter I dreaded came once more. As the town got ready for Christmas, couples strolled around beaming, and the lights changed to red and blue. Even though it's embarrassing, I don't think I'll ever have a girlfriend. I can hardly make ends meet on my current meager salary, let alone consider dating. I asked Chris if he wanted to go out to a bar with our bonus, but he had a date, so we had to reschedule for the next day. The street trees were withered and covered in snow, which was falling lightly and resembling white cherry blossoms. I missed spring. As I strolled around the streets by myself, snow silently accumulated on my transparent umbrella. As scheduled, Chris and I headed to the bar the following day. The north wind was cold, but the snow had ceased. I occasionally paired a beer with homemade hot pot at home, but this was the first time I went out to drinks with a coworker. We enjoyed some delicious meals after the year-end celebration, and the booze helped to lighten the mood. Chris questioned me about my time in school and how I got a job at the company. I told him how much I hated school and how my grandfather raised me because I had nothing to conceal. Chris stated that he will eventually need to take over his family's modest business. His girlfriend and he have been together since high school. Chris claimed to have heard from top staff members that many people had quit the company as a result of my salary complaint. Chris, however, who was still living at home, didn't appear to be very concerned about money. Then, after the new year, he asked me to take a drive. Despite having a driver's license, Chris admitted that he frequently used his father's vehicle. It was my very first time taking a drive. We ended the evening anticipating our post-New Year's excursion. On the drive home, I felt heated, perhaps because of the alcohol. I often walk 30 minutes to get to work. The city is near to where I reside. Chris and I joked and took our time returning, making the walk, which typically felt lonely, more pleasurable and lasting roughly 40 minutes. The excitement of New Year's has never really been felt by me. Although the alcohol tasted delicious, I never overindulged even as an adult, since I had vague memories of my dad drinking constantly and whining to my mom. I suppose my mom never allowed my dad to overcome her because she had a strong will. I took a few days off when work ended for the year, but nothing noteworthy occurred. I simply carried on with my thrifty routine. I took some time to relax, play games, and treat myself to a slightly more expensive spa treatment. I went for a stroll around the neighborhood since I was bored and saw that the community center that had once stood there had been destroyed. Had it been moved, I wondered. I often sit at a desk, so I moved a lot that day, which was unusual for me. I noticed a lot of elderly folks walking their dogs, and there were a good number of detached homes even in the metropolis. I'd always wanted a dog as an only child, but leased apartments didn't allow dogs, and naturally, my present apartment didn't allow them either. With my meager wage, I reasoned, I probably couldn't afford to care for a dog, even if I could have one. I was really pessimistic about the future. I resorted to my typical hobby of playing games as an escape from reality. As promised, Chris asked me to go for a drive in the new year. He picked me up close to where I lived. The car was really opulent because the road in front of my apartment was little. I became aware of my legs trembling instinctively as I settled into the passenger seat. Even I was taken aback, and Chris noticed and inquired about my well-being. I became aware that the car had brought back memories of the car accident my parents had been in. After I confided in Chris, he assured me, "Don't worry, I'll drive safely." The shaking eventually stopped, and after 2 hours or so of driving, we came to a picturesque mountain road. I liked the natural scenery and the town's outlook from the hills. I felt really content when I got home. I was initially startled by my own phobia of driving, but the expansive natural surroundings calmed me down. After the New Year's holiday ended, work resumed. I tried my hardest not to make any blunders. I discovered that the vacant area where the community center once stood had been transformed into a little park one Sunday while I was on a stroll. I began traveling that route after realizing it would decrease my commute while strolling through the park. It also shortened the walk to the baths the following day. I started going to the park every day after that. The park's cherry blossoms were stunning in the spring. There were now more than 300 clients at work. With each of us managing 150 clients, Chris and I divided the burden. I was able to arrive home at my regular time. I started to take my time walking the route because I had a specific time to wake up in the morning. Now that I had a shorter commute, I took deep breaths before leaving and appreciated the flowers in the park. For me, even the winter seemed drawn out and challenging. It felt like spring and summer went by so quickly. The summer soon gave way to the lonesome autumn of falling foliage. It was still unbearably hot when I visited the graves in September, and a homeless man moved into the park I frequented every day. It was a little unnerving, but there was something about the man's face that made me think of my grandfather, who had died too young. His profile had a remarkable similarity. On my walk home from work one hot evening, I saw that the homeless man appeared to be in poor health, most likely as a result of the heat. Since I assumed he wouldn't be able to pay for the medical bills, I decided to buy him a bottle of water from a vending machine instead of calling for an ambulance. "Are you okay?" I asked him as I walked up to him. He appeared to be awake. After giving him the drink, I left for home. I was relieved to discover that the homeless man was sleeping well on a bench and had improved in appearance the next morning. As the chill of winter drew near, the street trees became scarlet with fall foliage. Chris's father unexpectedly died of a disease around that time. Chris was compelled to quit the company early in order to take over the family business as a result. Before our farewells, I thanked Chris for everything. After that, I had to take over Chris's responsibilities, which included entering data and taking phone orders for more than 300 clients. This, of course, resulted in a great deal of overtime. A replacement clerk would be employed shortly, according to my employer, but it took a while for anyone to show up. As the days got busier, mistakes happened from time to time, and many days were spent apologizing to clients over the phone for their grievances. My employer frequently had to rush out to make deliveries because the clients were upset about shortages, and I had to apologize to him more often as a result. Winter wasn't easy. My body was exhausted, and I was often arriving home late. Weary from the day, I struggled home in the cold. Despite my lack of appetite, I made the decision to warm up at the baths. The typical homeless man was shivering and freezing in the cold when I arrived. I returned to my apartment and gathered an old jacket I no longer wore, some clean sweatpants, extra towels, and one of my 2 blankets. "It's much too cold out here, sir," I said to the homeless man. "Use this blanket, please," I went on. "There's a bathhouse close by if you like. How about we both go together? You can get warmed up. You can change into some of the outfits I provided. You're the one who brought me a drink the other day, young man. That was incredibly beneficial to me." The old man followed me gently to the baths and said, "If you're offering, then I'll go with you." The owner of the bathhouse remained silent because it was almost time to close. I lent the elderly man some shampoo, packed his clothing in a small bag, and we showered together. After hurriedly cleaning myself, I assisted in washing his back. We both relaxed in the hot bath as the man grinned. I brought a jacket, and he warmed up nicely, changed into my clean clothing, and departed the baths. He remarked, "You saved my life twice now, young man," as I carried him back to the park while keeping the blanket wrapped around him for warmth. Then he cuddled under the blanket on the bench. I returned to my apartment, disposed of the man's old clothing, and went to bed early since I was exhausted. The man was still sleeping comfortably when I woke up the following morning. I arrived at work and got to work on my regular duties. Mr. Harris abruptly entered the office while I was taking orders, trying to serve all 300+ clients. After observing me working at my computer in silence for some time, he suddenly said, "Alex, our clients have been complaining a lot about your recent errors. You're finished here. There's no point in coming in tomorrow. Are you going to fire me?" I objected, saying, "I've been trying my hardest to manage the workload of 2 people. Stop talking. Excuses are not what I want to hear. You're fired. I'm the president, and I'm saying that." Mr. Harris yelled. "I understand," I answered. I collected my belongings in the quiet office, thanked my managers, and walked out of the business. After being abruptly let go in that manner, I trudged back to my flat through the sunny afternoon streets. "Young man, are you off work already today?" Someone asked me as I was walking through the park. Upon closer inspection, I saw that it was the typical homeless man. He had shaved his beard and chopped his hair. I estimated his age to be approximately 75, yet he looked so much younger that I hardly recognized him. After I took a seat beside him on the bench, I added, "Actually, I just got fired from my job." "Well then, shall we go?" the elderly gentleman asked. Despite my lack of understanding, I followed him slowly. He guided me to the front door of an upscale apartment complex. He entered after unlocking the door. He unlocked the door to a spacious apartment after we rode the elevator to the top floor. "What is this location?" I inquired. The elderly man handed me a business card and declared, "This is my home. Asterisk Stephen Sullivan, chairman of SS Foods, asterisk," it said. "You're the chairman, right?" I was surprised. It was the most amazing place I had ever seen, and the view beyond the windows was stunning. "It's much too large for me. I want it for you. I found a purpose to live a bit longer because of you, and you saved my life twice," he stated. I gave him my name when he asked. The intercom buzzed at that moment. "Are you at home, grandfather?" A woman's voice stated, "I'm coming up now." She taught me a lot about Stephen. Yvonne, the woman, was the elderly man's granddaughter. She clarified that Stephen had resorted to drink and ended up in the hospital following the death of his wife. Yvonne would occasionally stop over to clean the flat, and she was unable to locate her grandfather once he was released from the hospital. He refused to go back to the apartment, but she ultimately located him in the park. He clarified that he no longer needed such a large flat and that staying at home caused him to drink excessively. The spouse of Yvonne's mother, who had assumed the role of president, was in charge of the business. SS Foods, Stephen's company, was a large corporation that owned numerous supermarkets. Stephen called Mr. Harris, the president of the noodle company I had worked for, as soon as he learned the reason for my termination. "Hi, Mr. Harris, it's Stephen Sullivan. After you wrongfully fired Alex for taking on an impossible task, I made the decision to stop doing business with your company." "Please, this can't be," said Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Harris stumbled, but Stephen cut the call off without saying anything more. He smiled at me after putting the phone on speaker so I could hear it. Stephen severed my connection with the organization I was employed by, he claimed. He had been told by friends how hard I was working. I went out for a fancy sushi dinner that evening, and shortly after, Stephen gave me the apartment. I made the opulent skyscraper my home. Stephen laughed hysterically as I ran around the apartment like a child because I couldn't believe it. I began learning how to operate a computer from Yvonne, who worked from home. When I finally got a job at Stephen's company as an office clerk, my pay tripled. Being of the same age, Yvonne and I became close and soon began dating, which ultimately resulted in our marriage. I invited Stephen to move in with us, but he said he intended to live close by. He was thrilled, and today we all three reside in the high-rise apartment together. I am expecting our first child with my wife. The way fate operates is peculiar. My life was transformed by only 2 modest acts of kindness for Stephen. My grandfather seems to have returned to me now, and I made a commitment to keep Stephen and my family safe going forward. I'm beaten today, man. I yawn. I yawned loudly aboard a packed train at morning rush hour. I'm currently working until the early hours of the morning at a bar. I was employed at a food manufacturing company as a salesperson till last month. I put in 20 years of hard work. At my job, I was an experienced worker. My customer base was strong, and I did well in sales. I got promoted year after year and even received a CEO's award in the past. This spring, an incident occurred that tainted my otherwise flawless sailing career. It all began when a major scandal arose after our parent firm was discovered to have taken shortcuts in the production of the goods. My company's financial status deteriorated as a result of the fallout. In the end, I was indirectly laid off because higher-paid managers were pushed to retire early. In a roundabout way, living expenditures were not covered by unemployment benefits alone, and the severance money was insufficient. I didn't have to worry about child support because I didn't have any children, but I was still paying for my dad's care costs because he was sick and in a facility, in addition to the house and car debts. As quickly as possible, I wanted a job. Any employment that offered a steady salary would be acceptable. When I learned that a veteran employee had left the pub, I frequently went to after work the day after I was informed of the layoff. I applied for a position right away. A good income increase came with working nights. As soon as I left the company, I started working at the bar. It's difficult to work late, but I've adapted to it. I rang the doorbell at my house, exhausted from work. My wife, Linda, usually opened the door immediately, but this time she stayed inside. "What's going on?" I opened the door with my key. "I'm home." Linda was seated in the chair at the dining table. The room was completely black, and the curtains were still drawn even though it was morning. I looked back at her and shouted out to her, sensing the strangeness of the situation. "Hey, is something wrong?" She then turned to look at me. She simply mumbled, "Please let me get a divorce," and bent her head. "What's going on all of a sudden?" "I've fallen for someone else." That's why, no matter how much I asked for a reason, she insisted on getting a divorce because she had fallen for someone else. I couldn't comprehend what had happened so suddenly, and I was at a loss for words. Linda and I had been married for 4 years. We were originally from the same hometown and high school classmates, reuniting at a class reunion. Both of us had moved to the city and found out we worked nearby, so we started going out for meals after work. Our relationship quickly developed, and it didn't take long before we decided to get married. After getting married, I didn't want to overburden her, so I asked her to quit her job and become a housewife. Since we married later in life, we hadn't planned on having kids. Linda had worked to her limits and didn't seem to have the energy for child rearing. We always talked things through and shared our feelings, and I was content thinking we were a happy couple. But that was all my assumption. Who was this person she had fallen for? Since when had she been interested in this person? Or were they already close? I had a ton of questions I wanted to ask. Just give me some time alone, please. In the silent room, I reflected on what my wife had told me. I didn't think I was such a terrible husband to be handed a divorce. I wasn't a drinker, nor did I gamble. I didn't have a history of messing around with other women. I thought I had always been kind to my wife, thought I had, since we got married. I had always been busy with work, coming home late every day, and spending weekends just sleeping due to exhaustion, hardly ever finding time to talk. Then I got laid off and started working nights. It had been a long time since we last enjoyed time together. Maybe my wife felt lonely being alone. We never even had time to talk about it. It wouldn't be strange if she found someone else who had what I lacked, something that made her unhappy. It was the result of my failure to make her happy. I suppressed my desire to cling to her and decided to accept the divorce. After that, she packed her things and left immediately, and I was left to live alone. Another day, "Well done," she would say with a smile. Every day, the days I took for granted now seemed like a dream. Since then, I threw myself into work every day to forget her. The bar job was harder than I thought. The business hours were from evening till 5 o'clock a.m., open 365 days a year, no days off. Besides the regular operations, there was a lot to do: making sales reports, training, and cooking, submitting reports, attending meetings. There were days I had training from 9 o'clock a.m. After finishing work at 5 o'clock a.m., I hardly had any time to sleep. But the quietness of a home without my wife was unbearable, so the tough routine was just what I needed. I was totally engrossed in my work. "Max, this month, our store sales are in the top 5 nationwide," my colleague said. "Oh, is that so?" "Sales reflect customer satisfaction. It means we've really made them happy." I replied, "Yes, indeed. We've been getting a lot of praise from customers lately. Just the other day, I gave a customer some soda water to clean a sauce spill on their clothes. It worked perfectly, and they were so pleased that they sent a thank you email to our store." "Your trick really worked wonders," my colleague shared. "That's great to hear," I said. I was recognized for my achievements and became the manager, working harder than ever. Then it happened. One morning, when I tried to get up, I found I couldn't stand. Suddenly, I was like a puppet with its strings cut, unable to move. After a while, I could slowly get up and managed to call a taxi to rush to the hospital. The doctor advised several months of rest. I was in a state of extreme exhaustion. Lying at home, I would see visions of my wife. "Are you okay? I've made some soup," she'd say. "But she's not here anymore. Let me forget." Unable to bear being alone, I decided to visit my mom's house in the countryside when I could move a bit. My parents' home was originally a vegetable farm, now just my mom managing it, modestly selling produce in the town market. My dad had fallen ill a few years ago and had been in and out of the hospital. The scenery of my childhood home, where I lived until high school, was as tranquil as if time had stopped. It's been a while since returning home after so many years. My mom was still as energetic as always. "You get laid off, then suddenly started working all night, and now a divorce. You're just worn out, both physically and mentally. You should rest up here for a while," she said. "Yeah, I will," I agreed. At home, I ate the fresh vegetables my mom grew and just slept, leading a simple life. The clear air in the countryside and delicious vegetables seemed to be healing my tired body and soul. After a while, feeling much better and energized, I went to the town supermarket. I had been relying on my mom for so long, I decided to cook for her, so I went shopping. Holding a shopping basket full of items, I lined up at the checkout and couldn't believe my eyes. Linda, my ex-wife, was working the cash register. What was Linda doing here? Her hair was longer, and she looked thinner, but it was unmistakably Linda. I changed lines to avoid being seen and quickly paid, then went to sit in my car to think about what had just happened. Why was Linda here? Had she returned to her hometown? What happened to the person she said she loved? My mind was in chaos, in a state of panic. I couldn't just let this go. Eventually, I parked my car next to the employee entrance of the supermarket and decided to wait for her to come out and talk to her. Calling her wouldn't make her come out, and I couldn't just show up at her family's home. This store was closing in another 2 hours. I thought waiting and talking to her directly was the best option. Then Linda passed by, pulling her bicycle. "Linda," I shouted, jumping out of the car. Linda looked shocked, her eyes wide open. "Max, what are you doing here?" she asked, looking down, tears welling up in her eyes. "What am I doing? What about you?" She seemed restless as she spoke. "Do you have time tomorrow? I'll email you, okay? I'll wait for your message." "Then see you tomorrow," I said. With those words, she got on her bicycle and left. On my way home, I received an email from her saying to meet at a cafe near the train station at noon tomorrow. I spent a sleepless night and headed to the meeting place with my mind in a haze. As I opened the door to the cafe, Linda was already there. She looked tired, with swollen eyelids, maybe from a sleepless night too. I sat down in front of her and ordered a coffee, then quickly drank some water. My heart was pounding, seeing her after such a long time. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I didn't know where to start. Linda was looking down all the time. There was a long silence. She was the first to break it. "I'm sorry," she said. I couldn't find the words to reply. "Have you been well?" That was all I could muster. Then she suddenly covered her face with both hands and started crying. "How can I be okay? I had to leave you, whom I wanted to be with." "What are you talking about? You said you fell for someone else and wanted a divorce," I asked, confused, looking at her crying. Then she started to reveal something shocking. "I never told you, but I have a 3-year-old daughter from my previous marriage." My ex-husband started to believe I was cheating on him, got furious, and demanded a divorce unilaterally. No matter how much I denied it, he wouldn't believe me. The verbal fights and views just increased. I couldn't take it anymore and agreed to the divorce. Of course, I wasn't allowed to see my daughter afterward. Then,
Out of the blue, I got a call. He was living with his mother, who was taking care of our daughter, but she passed away. He got ill and said he couldn't take care of her anymore. I couldn't leave my child with him, but I also couldn't bring her to my home. So I thought the only option was to divorce you and go back to my hometown to take care of her. Tears kept falling from her eyes. I've been struggling every day, wondering what to do. I couldn't bother you with my problems, but I didn't want to leave you. There hasn't been a day I haven't thought of you. It's my fault. I had something so important and got married. That's terrible, she said in a weak voice, crying aloud. I knew she had been divorced, but I didn't know about the child. I wish she hadn't kept it a secret, but knowing she had suffered alone all this time filled me with an overwhelming sense of heartache. I'm sorry too, Linda. I was so wrapped up in my own issues that I didn't listen to your problems. Whether you have a child or not, my love for you doesn't change. I grasped her hand, holding the handkerchief firmly with both of mine. Dad, I brought some vegetables with Grandma. Serve these pickles at the restaurant too, she said. Oh, thanks. These cucumbers are really good, I replied. After that, I quit the bar I was working at, sold my house, and came back to my family home. Now I'm living here with Linda and her child. Somehow, I've started being called Dad by her daughter, and it makes me feel a bit emotional every time. Then I opened the small bar in our town. The restaurant is famous for its healthy menu made with vegetables grown by my mom, and is bustling with customers every day. Honey, oh Max, should we also serve this onion? She asked. Yeah, it's made with good fertilizer, tastes great, I said. That's true. Linda is helping out at the restaurant too. My dad, who had been hospitalized, is now out of the hospital and comes to the restaurant for his rehabilitation. A few years ago, I never would have imagined returning to my hometown, opening a bar, living with my parents, Linda, and her child. There were many tough times, but they made me realize how happy I am now. Looking at everyone in the restaurant, I felt energized. All right, let's do our best today.
The coziness of our tiny rented flat and the warmth of my father's grin are ingrained in my earliest recollections. My name is Carla, and up until the age of 13, my life was just typical, in the greatest sense of the word. James, my father, was the type of man who turned everything into an adventure. Despite our little apartment, he transformed our living room into a fort on wet weekends and our small balcony into a fairy garden. Sarah, Mom, was different. She was more reserved and constantly wished for a larger home and a more opulent lifestyle. However, in those days, their differences seemed to perfectly balance each other out. Carla, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's? Mom would frequently inquire, and I would seize the opportunity. Grandpa Richard's house seemed like a second home to me, not because I didn't want to be home. There were countless nooks and crannies to explore in this lovely two-story Victorian home with creaky hardwood floorboards. Your mother needs her alone time with your father, Grandpa would say when I would show up at his house, grinning knowingly, and I need my time with my favorite granddaughter. More than the grown-ups around me recognized, I was a sensitive youngster. I realized that Mom and Dad had their own connection to maintain, and that she occasionally needed distance. It didn't harm me, on the contrary, it gave me a sense of maturity. Besides, they were amazing weekends spent with Grandpa. He would prepare the finest pancakes in the world, educate me about money management. He was a retired bank manager, and share anecdotes of Dad's early years. He once told me, you know, Carla, as we sat on his veranda eating breakfast, your mother dreams of a house like this. However, what is more significant than a large home, a loving household? I understood even at that early age and nodded. Despite its modest size, our flat was brimming with affection. When Dad got home from work at the insurance firm, He would embrace me and kiss Mom until she giggled in spite of herself. During such moments, our small room seemed endless. However, unexpected changes might happen in life. Dad started losing weight quickly when I was 13. He first made light of it by claiming that he was at last getting in shape. His eyes, however, sent a different message. Mom's expression got more anxious as the frequency of the doctor's visits increased. Dad used to say, "It's just a phase," while feebly ruffling my hair. "I'll be back to my old self in no time." However, he wasn't. He was engulfed like a wildfire by the illness, severe pancreatic cancer. My father, who used to be robust and energetic, disappeared in a matter of months. I could witness Mom's internal disintegration as I watched helplessly as she attempted to keep things together. I will never be able to forget the last time I spoke to Dad. His hand was hardly strong enough to clasp mine as he lay in his hospital bed. He murmured, "Look after your mother for me, Princess, and follow Grandpa's instructions. He knows more than all of us put together." Living in a fog was how I described the year following Dad's passing. Mom became so depressed that she was hardly able to look at me. I suppose I made her think of him too much. I'm really grateful for Grandpa Richard. In the maelstrom that had overtaken our life, he became my rock and my haven. Grandpa's house became my new normal and was no longer only a stopgap measure. I would wake up every morning in what had been Dad's former room, surrounded by pictures and awards from his early years. Grandpa did his best to replace the vacuum created by both of my parents' deaths, one via death, the other through grief, by making sure I continued to attend school and helping me with my homework. Sometimes Mom would call, but her voice always sounded aloof and uninterested. Her visits were much less frequent. She would hardly look at me before hurrying away. I made the decision to lower my expectations. Then everything changed precisely 1 year and 2 months after Dad passed away. One bright Saturday morning, I nearly didn't recognize Mom when she arrived at Grandpa's door. The mourning widow in black had vanished, to be replaced by a person with a fresh haircut and a bright yellow clothing. Happiness was radiating from her face. "Carla, get your belongings, my dear. You're coming home," she said, bouncing like a teenager on her heels. Confused, I glanced at Grandpa. He appeared to be as shocked as I was. Mom's happy babbling about everything and nothing filled the trip back to our place. Sitting next to a stranger who just so happened to look like my mother was like that. However, the biggest surprise was when we entered our flat. A towering man and a girl who appeared to be perhaps 3 years younger than me were standing in our tiny living room. When Mom virtually danced to their side, they both grinned sheepishly. "Meet Robert and Emma, his daughter Carla. Emma is going to be your new sister, and Robert is my fiancé." Mom grinned and held Robert's arm, saying, "We're getting married soon." The room began to swirl. "What? When did this occur?" I stumbled. "Oh, we've been dating for a while now." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "I didn't tell anyone about our relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way." I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "Mom has a fiancé," I whispered into the phone. "She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter." Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. "Sarah, how could you do this without telling anyone?" "Without telling your own daughter?" "Dad, I'm happy for the first time in forever." Mom's voice was defensive. "I've decided to start fresh, to live again. James would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever." There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. "I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. Just don't forget you have a family who needs you too." The 3 months before the wedding felt like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment seemed even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2. But that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emma, my stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. "Mom, can you help me with my hair?" Emma would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said Mom made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. Mom seemed blind to everything except Emma. When Emma mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago but was told we couldn't afford. When Emma complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emma wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. "Your sister needs to feel welcome here," Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. "Stepsister," I correct her, "and I need to feel welcome too." She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fussed over Emma's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emma close, holding her hand and introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been a waitress for all the attention I received. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard, but I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. "Really, Dad?" "A check," she hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. "I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa remained calm, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Sarah, you're rushing everything. First, the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Carla spends half her time now." "Oh, so that's it. You're playing favorites now." "No, I'm being practical. And maybe you should be too." I slipped away before they could notice me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She'd created this new perfect family in her mind, with Emma as the star child and Robert as the ideal husband. There didn't seem to be any room left for me. So I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. 4 years have passed since that moment, and I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a master class in avoiding conflict. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, and to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's. One evening, during our weekly family dinner, another exercise in pretending we were one big happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. "I've been accepted to State University," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to study finance and business management." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. "Actually, Carla, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone." I stared at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get higher education." Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "About that fund, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emma's education. She's incredibly talented, you know, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential." Robert nodded sagely. "Emma has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do, Carla. You could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. the college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me. They wanted to take that too. "That money is mine," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emma." "Don't be selfish, Carla," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "Emma is your sister." "Stepsister," I snapped, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. "And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else. My room, your attention, your love. But you can't have this. I won't let you take it." "How dare you?" Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. "After everything we've done for you, Emma needs. Emma needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me?" The argument ended with a door slamming in tears, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emma smirked whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. "Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart," he said as we drove away from the apartment. "Always has been, always will be." I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening I called Grandpa to share what I'd learned. "Tell me again about derivatives," he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. "I love hearing you explain it." But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dulled. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. "It's just age catching up with me," he'd say whenever I asked about his health. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." But I did worry. I started calling him twice a day instead of once, and I'd drive home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with such intense love that it made my throat tight. It was the middle of my final semester when Mom called. I almost didn't answer. It was the first time she'd called in 4 years, but something made me pick up. "Grandpa died last night," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m., Hartford Funeral Home." The phone slipped from my hand. I don't remember much of what happened next, just that my roommate found me curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Thursday came too quickly and not quickly enough. The funeral home was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen. Understated but elegant, with large windows letting in natural light. I arrived early, my black dress feeling too tight, my skin too sensitive. Everything wrong because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they weren't there. Instead, Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was organizing everything. "They're running a bit late," he said when I asked. "Your mother called to say they'd be delayed." The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life sharing stories about his kindness, integrity, and humor. I sat in the front row, alone with my grief, until halfway through the service when I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emma, all in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They took seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was set in a mask of appropriate grief, but her eyes were already darting around the room, assessing, calculating. I turned back to face the front, my tears now burning with both grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me. She couldn't put aside her pettiness for one day to mourn her own father. After the funeral service, I drove to Grandpa's house, my home for the past 4 years, only to stop short at the sight that greeted me. Scattered across the front lawn like worthless debris were garbage bags filled with my belongings, my clothes, my books, my photo albums. Everything from my room had been unceremoniously thrown out. Some bags had split open, spilling my life across the grass. With trembling hands, I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I was still standing there, key uselessly in hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but now with an expression of triumph rather than grief. "Oh, good, you're here to collect your things," she said, as if she was doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral. These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you'd better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emma's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags and trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything up, not asking questions when she saw my state. A week later, I received a call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Anderson from Anderson and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m. work for you?" I agreed, though I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it clear she was the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, Robert, and Emma were already there, seated like royalty in the leather chairs. Emma was examining her manicure while Robert scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." Mr. Anderson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document in front of him. "I, Richard James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." He started with the formal language, but I saw Mom already smiling triumphantly. That smile froze when Mr. Anderson continued. "To my beloved granddaughter, Carla Johnson, I leave my house at 1542 Oak Street, along with all its contents, and my entire savings account containing $475,000. The room went deadly silent for a moment. Then Mom's voice shattered it. "What? This can't be right," she shrieked, snatching the document from Mr. Anderson's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter." Mr. Anderson calmly retrieved the will. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Carla Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible." Mom's face turned scarlet. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, as attested by his doctor. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive." Mom's strategy suddenly shifted. The rage in her eyes transformed into tears as she turned to me. Carla, sweetie, please, she pleaded, her voice honey-sweet now. We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family. I stood up, holding the folder Mr. Anderson had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. Family? I asked quietly. Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave. Like how you tried to steal my college fund. Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years. That was different. We were. This is your problem, not mine. I cut her off, turning to leave. I suggest you start looking for a new apartment. I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't get in. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. I'm the legal owner of this house, I explained, showing him the paperwork. I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys. I collected all of Mom's, Robert's, and Emma's belongings while the locksmith was at work, including the clothing they had previously unpacked, the amenities they had taken from the restrooms, and the posters Emma had affixed to the wall of my former bedroom. Like they had done with my belongings, I packed everything into rubbish bags. I hauled all of their luggage onto the front porch and put them in a tidy arrangement once the locksmith was done and gave me the new keys. I was aware of the situation's symmetry. Where mine had been a few days before, their possessions now sat. I recognized the sound of Mom's car rolling into the driveway as the sun started to drop. Grandpa's favorite place to read his morning paper was the living room window, and I looked through it as their emotions transpired just as I had anticipated. What is this? Through the shuttered windows, Mom's cry was audible. Our belongings, everything we own is outdoors. As they got closer, I stood firmly in the entryway and opened the door. Mom was furious and her face was flushed. Emma had already started to cry theatrically, and Robert appeared to have swallowed something nasty. How dare you? Mom bounded up the stairs of the porch. Now we call this place home. You cannot harm us in this way. I can, in fact. Now, legally and legitimately, this is my home. You must get your things and depart. We have nowhere to go, Emma sobbed. I calmly retorted, you ought to have considered that before giving up your apartment. Not my problem. I resisted Mom's attempt to shove me inside the home. Carla, get moving. This is absurd. This is the home of my father. No, now it's my home, and I'll phone the police to report you for trespassing if you don't leave right away with your belongings. All of these bags then proceed directly to the dumpster. I took my phone out. Mom, it's your decision. Similar to how you offered me an option regarding my belongings a few days ago. Do you recall? As they packed their belongings, the following few minutes were characterized by threats and profanity. Emma continued pleading, I'll regret this, while Mom alternated between sobbing and yelling about how unjust everything was. Robert whispered to himself that he would challenge the will. Mom gave me one more look as they packed the last luggage into their car. You are not my daughter. Your dad would be embarrassed by you. I gave a sorrowful grin. No, Mother. The fact that I finally advocated for myself would make my father pleased. Goodbye. 6 months have passed since then. I'm now in my last semester and will graduate with honors. A charming young family is renting the property. Grandpa would have been pleased to see me save money from their rent payments each month. That first night, when everyone had gone, I discovered his note in the study safe. It said, My dearest Carla first, *, you have already dealt with your mother's response to my will if you are reading this. I apologize for putting you through that, but I was too familiar with Sarah. I was aware of her intended course of action. You possess both my business acumen and your father's honesty. Make good use of both. You may do whatever you want with the house. Just swear to me that the family pictures will remain in the attic. Some memories, even the unpleasant ones, are worth preserving. I fulfilled that promise, as well as the ones I had given to Dad and to him. I'm now concentrating on the future, letting go of the past, but retaining the knowledge it gave me. Family isn't always what you were born into. Sometimes it's the people who support, encourage, and believe in you. Somewhere in the city, Mom, Robert, and Emma still reside. I've heard that they ultimately got a new flat. They've made a few attempts to reach me, generally when they're in need of something, but I never get back to them. We should close certain chapters of our existence.
I took a deep breath, smoothing my hands over my navy blue skirt suit as I stepped into the bustling State Building lobby. Today was the big day, my interview for the senior correspondent position at the governor's office. This opportunity could be a game changer for my career. As a single mom, balancing work and raising my 8-year-old daughter Haley was a constant juggling act, but I was determined to make it work. The assistant at the front desk greeted me with a polite smile. "Miss Carter, the governor's team is ready for you upstairs," I nodded, mustering my most confident expression. "Thank you, I'm ready." As I made my way to the elevators, my phone vibrated in my purse, probably Haley checking in from school. I pulled it out to check the caller ID, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Haley's number, but much too early for her to be out already. "Mom, please come home. I heard everything." Haley's small voice trembled through the speaker, laced with fear. "What do you mean, sweetie? What happened?" "It's Keith. He hurt me. I heard him talking about something bad." The world around me seemed to freeze as the weight of her words sank in. Keith, my charismatic boyfriend of 6 months, had always been so warm and caring towards Haley, but the terror in her voice was unmistakable. "Haley, I'm on my way right now," I said, my voice shaking. "Stay hidden and don't let Keith see you, okay?" Without a second thought, I bolted out of the building, the governor's interview forgotten. My mind raced as I jumped into my car, scenarios of what could have happened flashing through my mind. How could I have been so blind? Keith had seemed like the perfect guy, kind, successful, even getting along well with my ex-husband Peter for Haley's sake. But now, my little girl's words echoed in my ears, a sickening pit forming in my stomach. I had to get to her, and fast. I burst through the front door of our modest suburban home, my heart pounding. "Haley? Haley, where are you?" A small figure emerged from the hallway closet, tears streaming down her face. Haley ran into my arms, trembling. "Mommy, I was so scared." I held her tight, stroking her hair. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. What happened?" Haley sniffled, her little hands clutching my blouse. "Keith came home early from work. Spat. He was yelling on the phone about some money problems. Then he started throwing things around the living room." A chill ran down my spine. In all our months together, I had never seen that side of Keith. "I tried to stay quiet in my room," Haley continued. "But then he came in and grabbed my arm really hard." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing angry red marks. White-hot fury coursed through me at the sight of those marks on my baby's delicate skin. How could he lay a hand on her? "Haley, I'm so sorry," I whispered fiercely, holding her close. "This will never happen again, I promise." The front door opened and Keith walked in, his expression changing from confusion to feigned concern when he saw us huddled together. "Jenna? What's going on?" I met his gaze with steel in my eyes. "How dare you put your hands on my daughter?" Keith's face contorted in mock bewilderment. "What are you talking about?" Haley must be making things up again for attention. He knelt down, his voice taking on that sickly, sweet tone he used to manipulate. "Isn't that right, Princess? You know I'd never hurt you." Haley shrank back against me, her eyes wide with fear. In that moment, I knew her terror was real, and the man I thought I knew was a monster. "Get out," I snarled at Keith. "Get out of my house and don't ever come near us again." His expression darkened, the mask slipping. "You'll regret this, Jenna. I can make your life hell." Before I could respond, the front door opened again, and Keith's 16-year-old son Ethan walked in, his headphones on and oblivious to the confrontation. "What's going on?" he asked flatly, taking in the scene. Keith straightened, his charming smile returning like a light switch. Nothing, son. Just a little misunderstanding. Why don't you go on up to your room? Ethan shrugged and disappeared down the hallway. I watched him go, a sinking feeling in my gut. If Keith could put on such a convincing act for his own child, what else was he capable of hiding? "This isn't over," Keith hissed, grabbing his coat. "You're going to be sorry you crossed me." With that, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. I held Haley close, my mind whirling. What had I gotten us into? And how could I protect my little girl from the storm I sensed was coming? After Keith's explosive confrontation, I knew I needed backup to protect Haley and myself. I texted my ex-husband Peter, knowing he would drop everything for our daughter's safety. Within the hour, he was at my doorstep, his face etched with concern. "Jenna? What's going on? Are you two okay?" I quickly recounted the incident with Keith as Haley clung to my side, her eyes still red from crying. Peter's expression darkened with barely contained fury. "That son of a bitch laid his hands on my little girl?" His fists clenched. "I'll kill him." "Pete, please." I put a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. As much as I understood his anger, violence wouldn't solve anything. We need to handle this carefully for Haley's sake. He took a deep breath, nodding reluctantly. Peter had always been protective of us, even after our divorce 2 years ago. I was grateful he was still in our lives. The next morning, I headed into work with Haley by my side, determined to investigate Keith's background more thoroughly. I pulled my tech-savvy colleague Tony aside. "Tony, I need your help digging into someone's digital footprint," I said in a low voice. "It's sensitive." Tony's eyes widened behind his thick glasses, but he simply nodded. "Say no more. Bring me what you've got, and I'll get to work." Back at my desk, I pulled up every scrap of information I had on Keith. Emails, phone records, social media profiles, anything that could provide a window into the truth behind his carefully crafted persona. As I compiled the files, movement at my periphery caught my eye. I glanced up to see Haley standing beside my desk, clutching her well-worn stuffed bunny. "Mommy, when is Keith coming back?" she asked in a small voice. My heart clenched at her innocent question. I got up and knelt in front of her, taking her little hands in mine. "Baby Keith, he's not a good man. You were right to be scared of him." I struggled to find the right words, my protective instincts raging. "He won't be coming back, ever. I won't let him hurt you again." Haley's lower lip trembled, but she nodded bravely. In that moment, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to keep this little girl safe from harm. Later that evening, Tony came to my apartment with a grim expression. "Jenna, you were right to be suspicious of this Keith guy." He pulled out a stack of printed documents, phone records, bank statements, even court filings from other states. I did some deep digging, and it's not pretty. Tony laid out a trail of evidence, a history of debt and unpaid loans, allegations of fraud and intimidation from ex-business partners. It painted a picture of a manipulative, vindictive man constantly chasing money through shady schemes. "There's more," Tony continued grimly. "I found 2 ex-wives who filed restraining orders claiming emotional and financial abuse. One of them, she dropped off the grid about 5 years ago." A chill shot down my spine. Had Keith's twisted games gone even further than we realized? I thought of Haley's terrified face, and my blood boiled. "We need to take this to the police," I stated, my voice hardening with resolve. "And we need an ironclad case to put this bastard away for good." Tony and I exchanged a determined look. For my little girl's sake, I would burn Keith's life to the ground and salt the earth. He had inexcusably threatened the most precious thing in my world, and he was going to pay. Over the next few days, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Haley's sake while Tony and I continued digging into Keith's past. The more we uncovered, the sicker I felt. Unpaid debts, allegations of fraud, and a string of scorned exes in his wake. Just how deep did this man's depravity run? One evening, there was a heavy knock at the door. I tensed, pulling Haley closer to me on the couch before getting up to answer it. To my surprise, it was Keith standing on the doorstep, an unsettling smile plastered on his face. "Hello, Jenna. Aren't you going to invite me in?" His voice was sickly sweet, but I could see the cold threat simmering in his eyes. "You're not welcome here," I stated firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want you to stay away from me and my daughter." Keith's expression hardened. That's no way to speak to your boyfriend, Jenna, after all we've been through together? He took a step forward, and I instinctively moved to block him from entering. We're through, Keith. I know what kind of man you really are. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. The lies, the manipulation, threatening a child, it's sick. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but that eerie smile didn't waver. You don't know what you're talking about, babe. Haley's just a troubled little girl looking for attention. Maybe I was a little rough with her, but she had it coming, disobeying me like that. White-hot fury lanced through me at his casual dismissal of abusing my daughter. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out physically. Get off my property before I call the police, you psychopath. Keith's gaze flicked over my shoulder, catching sight of Haley peeking around the corner. His smile widened, sending a chill down my spine. You'll regret this, Jenna. You have no idea what I'm capable of. With that ominous warning, he turned and strode back to his car, leaving me shaken. I quickly shut and locked the door, pulling Haley into a fierce hug. It's okay, baby. He's not going to hurt you again, I promise. My words sounded hollow even to my own ears. If Keith was willing to threaten a child, what other depraved acts was he capable of to regain control? The next morning, I arrived at work to find Tony waiting anxiously at my desk. Jenna, you'd better see this. He pulled up a series of images, screenshots of disturbing internet searches from Keith's laptop. Things no sane person should ever be looking for, much less the man dating a single mother. My stomach turned. There's more, Tony said grimly. I accessed the cloud backup for your home computer and, well, see for yourself. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up a video feed from inside my living room, a hidden camera I never knew existed. I felt violated all over again, watching mundane family moments playing out, all secretly recorded by that monster. We have to go to the police now, I stated, feeling numb. With this evidence, they can put him away for a long time. Tony nodded in solemn agreement, but something nagged at the back of my mind. If Keith was this unhinged and desperate, what other surprises might he have in store for the people trying to take him down? I made a call to Peter, knowing we'd need all the backup we could get. There was no going back now. For Haley's safety, I had to dismantle Keith's life, piece by sickening piece. With the damning evidence Tony uncovered, we knew we had to act fast before Keith could make his next move. Peter agreed to take Haley somewhere safe while Tony and I solidified our case against that monster. Are you sure about this, Jenna? Peter asked, concern etched on his face as he held our daughter's hand. This guy seems capable of anything. I don't want you putting yourself in danger. I have to do this, Pete, I stated firmly, for Haley's sake. Keith needs to go away for a long, long time where he can't hurt anyone else. Peter nodded reluctantly. Just be careful, and call me the second you need backup, you hear? After they left, Tony and I got to work compiling every shred of proof we had. Bank records, court filings, the recordings from the hidden camera. It was a dizzying array of manipulation and deceit. Wait, there's more, Tony said, his eyes widening at his computer screen. I think I found something big. He turned the monitor to show me a series of money transfers to an offshore account I'd never seen before. And not just any money. These amounts were huge, in the millions. What the hell is this? I breathed. Where is Keith getting this kind of cash? Tony shook his head grimly. I don't know, but it can't be legal. And look at this. He scrolled through more documents, fake IDs, fraudulent passports, all under different aliases linked to those shady transactions. A sickening realization began to dawn on me. You think he's been running some kind of long con, scamming and manipulating innocent people out of their life savings? The pieces were starting to fall into place. Keith's constantly shifting business ventures, the trail of embittered exes, his quick attachment to me and Haley despite his shady past. He'd simply been looking for his next big score, and I'd let him get dangerously close to my family. We need to take this to the authorities right away, I stated, feeling numb, before he gets tipped off and tries to run. Tony nodded grimly. I'll make some calls. We're going to bury this bastard. I forced myself to stay focused over the next few hours as we marshaled our evidence and contacted the police, but my mind kept drifting to Keith's earlier threat, his cold eyes boring into me. What else was he capable of to protect his con? A sudden knock at the apartment door made me jump. I tensed, reaching slowly for the baseball bat I now kept within reach at all times. "Who is it?" "It's me, Ethan. Keith's son." The teenage boy's muffled voice came through the door. I need to talk to you about my dad." My blood ran cold. Had Keith sent his own child here to threaten me, or worse? I gripped the bat tighter as I cracked open the door a few inches. Ethan looked past me into the apartment, his expression unreadable. "I know what my dad's really been up to. The lies, the money. I want to help you take him down." I searched his face for any hint of deception, but his steely gaze seemed sincere, if haunted. Slowly, I opened the door the rest of the way. "Tell me everything," I said grimly. If Ethan was truly on our side, he could be the key to finally destroying Keith's web of schemes once and for all. For Haley's sake, and every other innocent life that monster had shattered, I would make sure Keith paid the ultimate price. No mercy, no half measures. It was time to end this. With Ethan's help, the pieces finally fell into place. The kid may have been aloof, but he wasn't blind to his father's twisted games. Turns out Ethan had been collecting evidence against Keith for years, secret recordings, financial documents, you name it. I always knew there was something off about him, Ethan explained, running a hand through his shaggy hair. The constant moving, the shady business deals, the way he treated women like they were disposable. I just didn't know how far it really went until recently. Tony and I exchanged a grim look as we pored over Ethan's trove of damning evidence. It was a dizzying paper trail of fraud, emotional abuse, and ruined lives in Keith's wake. "We have to take this public," I stated, feeling that familiar fire burning in my chest. "Expose every last one of his sins to the world so he can never hurt anyone again." "Are you sure that's wise?" Ethan asked hesitantly. "My dad, he's capable of anything when he's backed into a corner. If he gets tipped off, he could run, or worse." I thought of Haley's terrified face that day, the marks on her little arm from Keith's vicious grip. No, I was done playing his twisted game by his rules. "Your father's reign of terror ends now," I said, my voice hardening. "We're going to take him down in a big way, live for the whole world to see. No more hiding in the shadows." With grim determination, we got to work. First order of business, find out where Keith's next big public appearance would be. The slime ball never missed a chance to preen for the cameras. Sure enough, Tony discovered Keith was headlining some big corporate event in a few days' time, rubbing elbows with local bigwigs and politicians. Perfect. Next, we looped in some other key players, Peter to help keep Haley safe and secure, and Linda, one of Keith's ex-wives who had barely escaped his clutches with her life years ago. She was more than eager to help bring him down once and for all. "I'll be there with everything I have on that monster," she stated grimly over the phone. It's long past time he faced real consequences. Finally, the big day arrived. I could feel the adrenaline thrumming through my veins as we got into position at the convention center where Keith's event was happening. Peter and Haley were safely tucked away, but I knew my little girl was watching over the live stream we had set up. Keith took the stage, all false bravado and that trademark smarmy grin, utterly oblivious to the reckoning that was coming. I caught Ethan's eye across the room and gave him a nod. Let the fireworks begin. With a few keystrokes, Tony hijacked the big screens flanking the stage. Suddenly, Keith's smiling face was replaced by images and footage documenting his endless trail of sins. The fraud, the abuse, the conning of innocent victims out of their life savings. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized what was happening. No, you can't do this. But it was too late. Linda was already striding towards the stage, her face contorted with years of pent-up fury. "Hello, Keith," she spat venomously. "Remember me?" As he sputtered and backpedaled, more damning evidence filled the screens. Transcripts, audio recordings, all of it leading back to him. There was no wiggle room, no escape hatch this time. I stood tall, staring Keith down as security finally moved in to subdue his thrashing form. "This is for my daughter, you sick son of a bitch," I called out, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "Your reign of terror is over." Keith met my gaze then, and I saw the mask finally crack, revealing the depraved, soulless monster beneath. But I didn't flinch. I was done being afraid. As they dragged him away, I felt something loosen in my chest. A weight finally lifted after all these months of living in fear. My little girl was safe, and that twisted bastard would never be able to hurt another innocent life again. The days after our explosive expose of Keith's crimes were a whirlwind, giving statements to the police, fielding a frenzy of media inquiries, and trying to shield Haley from the spotlight as much as possible. But through it all, I felt an immense sense of relief and vindication. That monster was finally behind bars where he could never hurt another innocent family again. Peter had been an absolute rock, keeping Haley occupied and reassuring her that the nightmare was over. I don't know what I would have done without his steady presence. "You did it, Jenna," he said simply one evening as we watched Haley playing in the living room, mercifully oblivious to the weight we had all carried. "You saved her." I managed a weary smile, suddenly feeling the full extent of the emotional trauma. "We saved her, Pete. If you hadn't been there for us." He gave my hand a comforting squeeze, and I felt a pang of regret that things hadn't worked out between us as a couple. Peter was a good man, a great father, but I had been too obsessed with my career to make our marriage a priority when it mattered most. At least now, in the aftermath of this chaos, we could be united as co-parents for Haley's well-being. A firm knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. I tensed automatically. Too many months of living on edge, I supposed. But when I pulled it open, I saw Ethan's familiar, brooding expression. "Hey!" He shuffled awkwardly on the doorstep. "I wanted to check in, see how you guys were doing." I studied Keith's son carefully. He had been through his own private hell, witnessing his father's depravity up close over the years. But in the end, Ethan had chosen the moral path, despite the risks. "We're coping," I replied honestly. "It's going to take some time to feel really safe again, you know?" Ethan nodded, looking pained. "Yeah, I get that." He drew a deep, shuddering breath. "Look, I know I can't make up for the shit my dad put you through, but if you'll let me, I want to be here, you know? For Haley and—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. In that moment, I saw it, the longing for some semblance of family, of stability, underneath his prickly exterior. This poor kid had been starved of that his whole life, thanks to his father's toxicity. On impulse, I reached out and pulled Ethan into a fierce hug. He stiffened at first, then melted into the embrace with a quiet sigh. "You're a part of this family now, kiddo," I murmured fiercely. "We'll get through this together." There would still be plenty of hard days ahead, to be sure, wounds to mend, trust to rebuild. But in that moment, I felt a sense of hope and determination well up in my chest. We had taken down the biggest demon of all. Whatever other battles awaited, we would face them head-on, unafraid, our little family of survivors bound by our scars yet standing tall. When I finally released Ethan, I saw the glimmer of tears in his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away with a gruff nod. That was okay. We had all the time in the world now to learn how to heal and find our strength together. "Come on in," I said with a soft smile, gesturing inside. "There's someone who's going to be real happy to see her new big brother." As Haley came bounding over, her face lighting up at the sight of Ethan, I knew we were going to be all right. The nightmare was over. A new chapter was just beginning. In the weeks after Keith's dramatic downfall, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least some semblance of it. The nonstop media frenzy died down, the police wrapped up their investigation, and that sick, twisted chapter was finally closed. Of course, the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. I could see it in Haley's eyes sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, that flicker of residual fear and uncertainty. My poor baby had her innocence shattered at such a tender age. But she was a resilient little fighter, my girl. With me, Peter, and even Ethan rallying around her, she found her sunshine again, bit by bit. Ethan, I'll admit, I had my doubts about him sticking around at first. The kid had been through his own private trauma thanks to his scumbag father. Who could blame him if he wanted to just cut and run from this ugly chapter? Instead, he stunned me by digging his heels in, determined to build a real relationship with Haley and be the supportive big brother figure she needed. They grew inseparable those first few months, playing endless rounds of make-believe and watching corny movies together. I'll never forget the night I caught them giggling secretly in the living room, Ethan's face unguardedly joyful as Haley smeared makeup all over his cheeks. Just a couple of silly kids being kids, without a care in the world. In that moment, My heart swelled with overwhelming gratitude that we had each other to lean on through the darkness. Of course, Peter was instrumental as well, my eternally patient ex-husband and co-parent. I lost count of how many times he dropped everything to rush over, whether it was fielding a night terror from Haley or just giving me a shoulder to cry on. "You don't have to thank me, Jen," he said simply one evening as we sat on the porch enjoying the tranquility. "I'll always be here for you two. That's never going to change." I felt a pang of wistfulness, thinking of what might have been if I had prioritized my little family over my all-consuming career years ago. Peter was a good man, a good father, maybe in another life, but I pushed those thoughts aside, giving him a grateful smile. "I know, and that means everything, Pete. Really." As the summer days stretched on peacefully, I found myself slowly shedding the weight of fear and hypervigilance I'd carried for so long. The smiles came more easily, the laughter rang out more freely in our humble little home. One evening, I was putting Haley to bed when she stopped me shyly. "Mommy, can I give this to Ethan, to say thank you for being so nice?" She was clutching one of her prized possessions, a delicate wind chime made of bright seashells that Peter had brought back from a vacation years ago. Despite her young age, Haley understood the significance of such a gesture. I felt a lump form in my throat as I stroked her soft hair. "Of course you can, baby. I'm sure he'll love it." As I left her bedroom, I could see Ethan lingering in the hallway, his brooding expression softening just a touch as he watched his new little sister drift off to sleep. In that moment, I knew we had finally formed our own little family, a bit unconventional, a bit scarred, but bound by cords tougher than blood, loyal, protective, and absolutely unbreakable against any storm. I caught Ethan's eye and smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace wash over me. The nightmare was finally over. All that remained was the warm, brilliant promise of new horizons ahead. As I drifted off to sleep that night, the gentle chiming of Haley's gift to Ethan echoed faintly, like a lullaby ushering in hopeful dreams. Our future was wide open, the possibilities endless, and we would face it together, steadfast survivors all.